Don't I have that too?
I don't waste breath on an enemy. No room for negative energy. Nah. I hear them talking, don't get to me. Karma gon' catch up eventually.
Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
Nah. I hear them talking, don't get to me. Karma gon' catch up eventually.
All right, everybody, welcome in to Load the Box. I'm your host, Jordan Hawthorne, joined as always by the marvelous and wonderful Jack Day. Jack, what a weekend. First time we've had anything even related to sports since, like, the Super Bowl. This is amazing to me. It was the most watched draft in NFL history, and it was a really fun one for me. I watched the first 2 days, and then the third day I had to do some yard work. But whenever we were eating lunch, I had those late rounds on my phone. Jack, walk me through how you watched the draft, and as always, how was your week, man?
Yeah, I mean, the draft was a ton of fun for me. Quite a bit of work for me as well. I went into it. I was doing a lot of writing as well throughout the weekend. So it was on Saturday night, it was nice. I had a beer and just kind of started a bonfire. And it felt really good. I was just relaxing. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to start writing my draft recap because I'm that much of a nerd. Ended up writing, it was almost a 2,000-word article on my recap of the Vikings. And it's up on kfan.com right now. So if you want to check that out, quick plug for myself. I had a lot of fun writing that. It is probably one of my most favorite pieces I've ever done as well. So I'd appreciate if you're listening to the show to check that out. But overall, I think the weekend was just fantastic, especially if you're a Vikings fan. I mean, so many picks. I just thought there were so many picks that were great value picks on top of Rick Spielman wheeling and dealing, finding his way. He didn't trade up at all, but there was rumors that we had contact with Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 14, trying to maybe jump Philly for Justin Jefferson, but that actually worked out in our favor and not trading up. And then we traded up. We didn't trade up. We traded back several times, ended up acquiring a total of 15 picks throughout the weekend. So it was a very busy weekend of content covering that. And we also set ourselves up, according to Over the Cap, which I believe that's the right one, where they kind of look at predictions for comp picks next year. We're on pace to have about 12 picks again for 2021 in the Cleveland draft. So be ready for next year. Rick Spielman is not done. I think he's looking there's been rumors for some reason, people saying they don't like Rick Spielman as a GM. Say what you want about him, but I personally think he is one of the best GMs we have ever had. He has killed draft after draft. I mean, the amount of talent he has found and put on this roster is amazing. And I have a very good feeling about this 2020 draft class.
Yeah, bringing up Spielman, I really like whenever you're picking in, like the fifth and later rounds, I feel like it starts getting into kind of a phrase I like to use, throwing crap at the wall and hoping something sticks. You're kind of just taking a guy based like athletic profiles. You just take like a fast guy and hope that you can develop him into being a good defensive back. Or, you take a really strong guy and hope that, he ends up working his way into developing techniques to become a good D-tackle, things of that nature. And I love the way Spielman drafts. I love that he's always looking to move back. And, especially in those later rounds, I mean, like I said, I was watching it at, around lunchtime, day 3. And my dad was like, why do they keep trading back so much? Like, why does he keep doing that? And I was like, because he wants to get more picks for this draft so he can just fill out the roster. I also saw a really interesting point on Twitter this week before the draft about how the Vikings want to get a bunch of they wanted to get later round picks so that way if they had a guy who they wanted to bring in as a UDFA, a name that comes to mind is a guy like Nate Stanley, the quarterback that we took out of Iowa with pick 234, 7th round. Instead of having to give him a UDFA contract, which, will be bigger than probably what it is now, and we'll have to bid against other teams, stuff like that, we just take him with our 7th round pick, and now I'm pretty sure he's on like a multi-year contract. And if he sucks, then we can just cut him and say, okay, well, we tried anyway. So really clever maneuvering with the cap space and, making sure that we're saving as much money as we can. And honestly, Jack, I think we're ready to get into the draft, starting with round 1, obviously. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. I think one thing before we dive into that, I know it's kind of your forte in doing this, and
Oh,
you've
yeah,
gotten a
you
lot
want me to
better
do
at
it?
doing it. You might as well plug the Twitter handle. We're inching very closely to 900 followers, which puts us 100 away from our goal of being to 1,000 by the draft time. Obviously didn't get there, but we have grown a lot since last fall, and that's exciting. So if you do follow the show, or if you do listen to the show, listen to what Jordan has to say to you now, and go follow the Twitter page.
Yeah, absolutely. So give Load the Box follow on Twitter. The Twitter handle is at LTB Vikings. That is at LTB as in Load the Box, LTB Vikings as in 2 Omo Vikings. You can follow Jack on Twitter at Jack_H_day. One more time, that is Jack_H as in Hudson_day. And then you can follow me on Twitter at JHawthorne16. That is JHawthorne with no E, 16. And now let's get into it, Jack. So you mentioned it. We tried to move up a little earlier into the second round to try and jump Philly. Who we were trying to get there may remain a mystery. Maybe we were trading up trying to get, Jefferson. Maybe we were just trading up trying to get somebody else. But we weren't successful in that, so we just had to sit and wait at 22. And Justin Jefferson fell straight into our lap. I'll let you go first. I'll let the optimist go first because I didn't love the pick. I wasn't super thrilled with the pick, but I understand why that was the pick. Jack, I'm going to let you kind of do the positive side of this, and then I'll kind of give a rebuttal, and then we can go into the pick that I think we agree on that we like.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people out there, kind of the biggest argument against Justin Jefferson is that he was primarily a slot receiver. Yes, he played with Joe Burrow, one of the best quarterback ever to have a college football season last season in 2019. Also played alongside Jamar Chase. However, this guy, yes, he played took a lot of his snaps out of the slot. I still absolutely love this guy. Gary Kubiak is very high on him in his offense, and I just think he's a guy, he doesn't look as fast as his 40 time on tape, but I think that's because I was reading a more analytical dive into this and saying that he doesn't look like he's running the 4.40 that he actually can run because he is such a route technician. He is so pure in and out of his breaks. It almost looks like he's running in slow motion. He's got very sure hands as well, and I absolutely love this pick. I understand Adam Thielen. He is better out of the slot. He is able to play out wide. There's PFF actually did a breakdown today on their Vikings Twitter page talking about the percentages of where he played last season and in 2018 as well. Thielen can play outside. He's just a little bit better, obviously, in the slot because there's more mismatches, but we've seen Thielen do his thing from the outside as well. And the thing that excites me the most, I mean, receivers themselves, obviously they can scare me in the first round, but I think it's very difficult when you lose a guy like Stephon Diggs and just how good this receiving class is. I think would have just been a huge mistake to miss out on one of the top receivers in this draft class, and I personally believe we got a top 4 wide receiver. I think you could have put Justin Jefferson closer to that third overall receiver, depending on how you feel about a guy like Henry Ruggs, who oddly enough was the first receiver off the board because the Raiders are the Raiders and they just love speed at the wide receiver position.
I was about to say, I called that. I was like Babe Ruth. I told everybody, I had like a little get together. I broke the social distancing rules and I said the Raiders are taking Henry Ruggs because it is Mark Davis or whatever his son's name is, and they love speed, and it's just what Oakland did, and now it's what Las Vegas is going to do, and I actually liked Henry Ruggs a lot. But please continue with your breakdown of Jefferson.
Yeah, and I myself, I'm not a huge analytical wizard, but one of my buddies actually is, and he kind of turned me on to the site that I've been using a lot in some of my articles, and this site is extremely high on him as well. It's called playerprofiler.com. They have him measured in at 6'1", 202 pounds. He ran the 40-yard dash in 4.43 seconds, ranking in the 86th percentile. They have his speed score ranked at 104.9 in the 83rd percentile, and his burst score at 126.8 in the 80th percentile. For all three of those metrics, he is above the 80th percentile, which excites me. And on top of all that, his breakout age was 19.6, which is the 74th percentile. See, I'm already starting to stumble on numbers because that's not my strong suit. But that's another tool that the analytically minded individuals look at in wide receivers as their breakout age. And he is right near that 75th percentile for when he broke out as well, which excites me. I think it says a lot about wide receivers when they broke out, and he was one of the younger receivers to break out. And obviously, I know the argument with him playing with Jamar Chase, it's going to benefit him, but bringing him to Minnesota and letting him play with Adam Thielen, that's going to benefit him as well. I think that benefited Stephon Diggs a lot. Stephon Diggs is a great route runner as well, and I think they benefited off each other. I think we're going to see something similar in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. And on top of it, kind of my closing case of this that really has me just amped up, I've seen numerous NFL analysts and this playerprofiler.com, they have like an analytical measured tool to see who's the athlete they most compare to. On playerprofiler.com, they have him compared to Reggie Wayne, and then I've seen comparisons to Michael Thomas and Keenan Allen as well. And I'm just telling you now, if we can get some sort of blend between those three wide receivers, we are going to be sitting very good at the wide receiver position for the next 10 years with Justin Jefferson on this roster.
Yeah, I will say he looks damn good in purple and gold. He's not going to have to get new cleats. That's an upside. And, Jack, I don't really mess too frequently with them numbers, being from the south side, or from the southern part of Ohio. So I do just want to say, eye test-wise, he makes some pretty good catches. I'm not going to go all in on him, and maybe it's a little bit because I was all in on Laquan Treadwell. I was calling him Mega Quan. I was all in on it. That stupid dance that went around on the internet in 2016, the Hit the Quan dance, I was doing it all the time. So excited about Laquan Treadwell, and then he flopped, one catch, 15 yards in his rookie season. Jefferson, I think, is different. I think Jefferson is going to bring solid production, and that's something that I've kind of come around on. I know me and you were talking draft night. I was kind of drunk texting you about it, and I was very upset, and then the next day I was still pretty upset about it, and then I've watched some tape, I've watched some film breakdowns, and I don't hate him as much as I thought I was going to. I think he's going to bring solid production to the Vikings, and you know what? I think whenever we have 2 first-round picks, and we also have guys on the team like B.C. Johnson, like Hollins, who I actually think might be poised to carve himself out a little niche in this offense as more of a speed guy. I like where the Vikings are sitting at the wide receiver position today. I think Jefferson is going to end up being, like I keep saying, production. I think he's going to produce in this offense. And I text you this, and I've told everybody that will listen to me this. Adam Thielen needs to immediately move this guy into his home and just start teaching him the ways. Because I think in 5 years, let's say, when Thielen is kind of maybe, hanging up the cleats, Jefferson could easily take Thielen's job as a guy who works mostly out of the slot, does his business mainly out of the slot, but if you need him to go outside, he can do that as well. He has good hands. That's something that one of my favorite draft picks in this class, or one of my favorite prospects in this class, was Denzel Mims. I think a lot of Vikings fans love Denzel Mims because he said he was a Vikings fan, but Mims kind of had issues with his hands. A lot of these later round receivers have issues with dropping the ball, and Jefferson, he'll catch the ball if it's thrown to him. He does make some really spectacular looking plays, and he's not too shy after the catch either. I text you, I think, on Thursday night, said, oh man, I don't know if I love this pick. Maybe we should have waited and gotten a guy like Mims, waited and gotten a guy like T. Higgins, because I thought T. Higgins was going to be there whenever we picked in the second round, and he wasn't. He went with pick 33 to the Bengals, which the Bengals had an insane draft, but we won't get into that. I'll save that for whenever I'm talking to my Bengal friends Bengal fan funds. But Jefferson, I think, like I said, solid production guy. I don't know if he's going to be as flashy as Judy is going to be, as CeeDee Lamb's going to be, but there's a reason he's considered the third or fourth best receiver, and he's not even really mentioned with Judy and CeeDee Lamb. But overall, I think looking back on it, I like the pick, especially whenever you look at where the board was, whenever you look at what was available. I'm here for it. So, buy your number 19 Justin Jefferson jerseys, and let's get rolling. Moving on to the next pick.
Hold on. I have one thing, couple last touch points on this. I think watching the film, this is a guy that has really become one of my favorite picks in this draft, so it'll probably be my longest little rant on him. One, just wanted to clear up what you just said. It's number 18. We already have number 19
I'm an
on
idiot.
the team. You forgot about that wide receiver that went undrafted.
Jack, he didn't even go to the
State
combine.
But I just want to throw in a couple other things here because you do bring up a good point with Laquan Treadwell. Then you go farther back to a wide receiver that made my childhood more painful than it should have been in Troy Williamson. I just wanted to bring this up. The player profiler tool. I typed in Laquan Treadwell's name just because I thought it'd be interesting. His 40-yard dash was in the 11th percentile. His speed score was the 48th percentile, and his burst score was the 17th percentile. And his pro comparison was Dwayne Bowe. So I'm like overly excited about Justin Jefferson, but I think the metrics excite me. I mean, the stats excite me. He had 18 touchdowns at LSU as well. There's one in those short little highlight reel that SportsCenter tweeted out when the Vikings took him. There was a play, I believe, in the national championship game where he kind of ran like a little speed out route, and he was running towards the sideline, and there was two Clemson defenders running at him, and he absolutely deked them out of his shoes. He's got the run after the catch ability as well, and all in all, I am ecstatic about this pick. I'm very pumped up. And, hey, I've made myself clear I do need some new jerseys. My new jersey, it might be that number 18 in Justin Jefferson. I will end my rant now, but I am very, very excited about this.
And, yeah, I see why some Vikings fans out. I also see why some Vikings fans are a little hesitant to fall in love. But here's somebody that I'm already head over heels with, and that's the Vikings traded out of the 25th pick. We moved down to the 31st pick. I think, was it San Francisco that moved up in front of us?
Yes.
Do you remember who they took with that pick? Because I don't off the top of my head.
I can look it up if you want to start talking.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead. I'll break it down. I'll do my Jeff Gladney praise segment here. The Vikings move down to 31. We wait. We get Jeff Gladney out of TCU. And my God, I was hyped. I started clapping. I was very, very excited about getting Jeff Gladney because I really like the way he plays. He is a Mike Zimmer type defensive back. He has fluid hips. He is physical. He plays with an edge. He plays with a swagger. And he is just, I told Jack, I think this guy could end up being Xavier Rhodes, but he's not going to pretend like he tore his hamstring every time he eat. I'm really excited to see what Gladney's going to do under the tutelage of a guy like Mike Zimmer, the DB whisperer. I think Gladney steps onto the team. I think he instantly becomes maybe the team's best corner. I think he's definitely going to get playing time on day one this season. I think the defensive backs are going to line up as follows. I think Gladney's going to be on the side. I think there might be a third-round pick from this class that we'll get into a little later, also on the outside. And then we're going to see what Mike Hughes can do in the slot. And all three of those guys can play some really sticky man coverages, which means we're going to be able to blitz a little bit more. And feel a little bit better that, all of our cornerbacks aren't going to get beat. We're going to be able to do a lot of fun stuff with the safeties playing up in the box. Obviously, that's Harrison Smith's forte. And I'm just really excited to see what this defense is going to look like with Gladney. Watched a film breakdown on him. I've watched a couple of them. One of the favorite ones that I've seen is a film breakdown of him going, one-on-one with Denzel Mims. Who, is obviously he was a pretty high-touted receiver in this class, and Gladney really manhandles him for most of the game. He gives up one touchdown catch to him, where it shouldn't have been a touchdown, actually, because the safety was kind of out of position, but that's neither here nor there. Just really, really excited to see what Gladney can do. He stays in people's pockets. His hips let him just stay with people no matter how good of a route they run. He plays with a high IQ, and he's just the perfect Mike Zimmer corner. So really excited about that pick. And Jack, I think you were as well. So I will let you talk about Gladney now because I really can't say anything else about him.
Yeah, I am very excited about him as well. And just going back to what we were talking about before this, the Vikings traded with San Fran and they took Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver out of Arizona State. So it was a great trade. It let Rick Spielman get more draft picks, which we all know by this point he absolutely loves doing. And he was able. I don't know if he turned one of those picks, or if it was just another one of our fifth and sixth round picks. But he was able to turn those into a fourth and fifth round pick in 2021. So, but I am very high on Gladney as well. I'm super excited. Another guy that looks good in purple. He was already playing in some purple at TCU. And like you said, he's the perfect scheme fit for a guy like Mike Zimmer. He's going to be able to come in here, and Mike Zimmer is going to be able to work with him. His former head coach at TCU said he's going to fit right in Zimmer's system. He knows that Zimmer can be a more hard-nosed coach, but Gladney is not fearful of that. Like you said, he's very physical. He will come flying downhill in the run game and make some plays in that aspect as well. He sticks on people in coverage, and really, I mean, my favorite word that I've seen when reading about him, and it just shows up on tape, is just calling him a dog. He's got that dog mentality. He's going to let you know if he hits you hard. He's going to let you know if he breaks up a pass. He will get up in your face, and even Zimmer said sometimes he's a little bit too aggressive and too physical. I am all for that. Like, if he's going to make a couple mistakes because he's overplaying the football or he's running downhill to make plays, I'm all for that. I love the physicality that we can bring in the cornerback position. Last year, we didn't see it a ton. We've seen flashes of Mike Hughes be able to come downhill, make some good open field tackles, but I'm very excited to see what we can do now with Gladney, someone we're going to mention a little bit down the road. I think we got some guys. We have another guy that we drafted later in the draft other than the third-round guy as well, and then there's an undrafted guy. I'm excited to see if he can crack the roster. And this is without even mentioning guys like Holton Hill or Chris Boyd, who Mike Zimmer is also very high on. So we kind of we completely have revamped our secondary. I think Harrison Smith has got to be the oldest member of the secondary now. I think he's 31. Other than that, I think all of our cornerbacks are under the age of 25, and they have their primes in front of them. So we went into this draft, we had Jeff Gladney selected in one of the mock drafts we did on last week's show, and we were worried about the state of the Vikings secondary, and now I legitimately think, it's hard to say this now because these prospects we just drafted and we don't necessarily know if they're going to pan out in the NFL, but I'm very excited to see what Mike Zimmer can do when he gets his hands on these guys and he can teach them up a little bit, because we have brought in a ton of talent into the secondary, and I'm just excited as hell to see what Mike Zimmer can do with them.
Yeah, and I think moving on past that, obviously, we a lot of people, and by a lot of people, I mean one person in particular who gives us the right to post our show on his website, but I guess I'll go ahead and I'll, kind of Hulk Hogan 80s style WWE call out Joe Johnson here on Load the Box. He wasn't happy with the class because we went pretty heavy on defense, and that's kind of, one of the things he doesn't like about Zimmer is Zimmer was kind of, in his world's me, give me all the defensive backs I can get my hands on. And I think the obvious counterpoint to that is to just say, look at what we lost in the offseason. Xavier Rhodes is playing a couple hours away from me in Indianapolis. Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander are both playing in Cincinnati next season, which is literally 45 minutes down the road from me. And then Andrew Sendejo went to Cleveland. And we lost, what is that? Is that four players that we lost in the secondary that were pretty big contributors. I mean,
and you can
Trey Waynes.
You can
go
even
ahead,
throw
go ahead.
Jaron Curse in there, who's now
Yes,
in Detroit
exactly.
as well.
Exactly. I don't know how I forgot Jaron Curse. I literally spent all of last season screaming about how much I liked him and how sad I was that he was going to leave. But so 5, key defensive players that you could say. I mean, Trey Waynes and Xavier Rhodes have been the 2 corners on the outside for the Vikings for the last 3 or 4 seasons. So you could even maybe go back to like 5 seasons, since I guess we exercised his Wayne's fifth year option. But just really like the Gladney pick, really like all of the defensive backs that we got in this class, and I can't wait to talk about Cam Dantzler after we talk about the guy whose jersey I will be buying. If you see anybody in a number 72 Ezra Cleveland jersey next season, it's probably me, because Jack, I love this pick. I did not think we were going to be able to get a guy like Ezra Cleveland where we were picking in the second round. I was actually in favor of moving up in the second round to try and take a guy like Cleveland, or maybe even take a guy like Jalen Hurts, which, we're not even going to have time tonight to talk about the implications of him going to Philadelphia. But Cleveland to me is, and to most Vikings, talk show hosts or whatever you want to call it, he's Brian O'Neill 2.0. He is a really physical project player who, if you give him a year to, learn the system, get some strength under him, he's going to step in and probably be, the left tackle of the future. And you never know, maybe he balls out in training camp and in preseason, and they decide that they want to start him at left tackle week 1. Or maybe Riley Reif, God forbid, gets dinged up at some point during the season. Ezra Cleveland steps into that left tackle role, and he balls out. That's what Brian O'Neill did. I think Rashad Hill got injured against the Packers in week 2 a couple years ago, and Brian O'Neill stepped in, balled out, didn't give up a sack until like week 12 or 13 of last season. And Ezra Cleveland is just a mirror match of Brian O'Neill. He's physical. He's also a freak athlete. He's a fast guy, and I really love this pick. I think with Cleveland and O'Neill at the tackle position, I think that position is set for the next 10 years if we can keep them in Minnesota. And the fact that he fell to us really is the surprise of this draft to me.
Yeah, and this is another guy, I think going back to what you said, what Joe was saying, I understand his frustration of not taking any interior offensive linemen, but I think both of us on the show are excited to see what a guy like Drew Samia can do. And I think there's a good chance. I mean, there's still 3 roster spots heading into camp. I think there's a good chance one of those are filled by a free agent guard signing. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet, but there's a good chance now that it is to happen, because it's not going to go against it's not going to go against losing comp picks at this point now. I think the cutoff for that was 4 o'clock yesterday. But I understand that, but we used 2 of our 3 most valuable picks on the offensive side of the ball, kind of getting good scheme fits for Gary Kubiak. That's exactly what Ezra Cleveland is. He's a perfect scheme fit for Kubiak, and so is Justin Jefferson. He's very high on both of them. And Cleveland is another guy where if you look at his metrics, they are all insane. His height is in the 78th percentile. His bench press is in the 83rd percentile. 20-yard shuttle was in the 94th percentile. 3-cone drill, which is what a lot of analysts were talking about because he absolutely annihilated his, was in the 98th percentile. Broad jump, 90th percentile. Vertical jump, 75th percentile. And 40-yard dash, 96th percentile. He's an athletic freak with a lot of power. He's going to be able to swing outside. He's going to be able to get downfield, get into that second level, and get out in front of Delvin Cook. It might take a year for him to learn the system, but he's a very, very exciting prospect. And like you said, he's a 75.6% match measurable-wise with the Vikings' best offensive lineman, Brian O'Neill. So that's got to get you excited. He's, like you said, it might be a little bit of a project, but I think offensive linemen kind of always are, especially when you get into the second round. I think this is the guy that the Vikings had some interest in the first round even, and he fell all the way down to them at the 58th pick. It's hard for me to get overly excited about offensive linemen, but when I was looking at his metrics and his comparisons and all this stuff, I was ecstatic about this pick as well. I think he's going to be, like you said, a legitimate left tackle for the Vikings in the future. It might take a year for him to get there, but he's got all of the measurables to do so, and I think he's going to be a very talented player. He's reuniting. This was kind of something on Twitter as well. He's reuniting with his friend Alexander Madison, who also played at Boise State. They were both pumped up to be in purple together, so I'm pumped for him to come to the state of Minnesota and eventually win a starting left tackle spot on the Vikings roster.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I really miss NCAA football games because I'd always play as Boise State just so I could play on that badass blue field. But two, that's my favorite pick of the class. I'm getting his jersey. I've kind of already decided that. There's a slight chance that I might get this next guy's jersey, but Ezra Cleveland, I mean, he just fits the type of guy that I am, bigger guy, offensive lineman, that whole shtick, because I'm not a small fella. So really like, repping the offensive line jersey, showing them some love. And I guess that we're going to go ahead and give Ezra Cleveland the Tom Day offensive lineman of the draft award. So that I just made up out of thin air. But moving on now, Vikings don't make any moves. We pick at 58, and then we wait all the way to pick 89. And we take my third favorite pick of this class. We take Cameron Dantzler out of Mississippi State, nicknamed the Needle because he is small, he is slender, and he hits hard. And when he hits you, it feels like you just with a needle. I love that story. I love that nickname, mainly because I'm afraid of needles. I really like Dantzler. He kind of choked on his combine whenever he ran the 40. I think he ran like a 4.5 or something. And then he posted a video of him doing like a pro day workout on social media, and he ran a 4.38. It shows on film too that he runs a 4.38. I really think the Vikings took Gladney to replace Xavier Rhodes, the more physical, tough guy, gonna get in your head, follow you around the field guy. And then we took Cameron Dantzler to match up with your deep threat and just run down the field. He has great recovery speed. And he's not afraid to come down, play the run either. He's not a terrible tackler. He gets the nickname the Needler for a reason. I'm always like weird to talk about a defensive back's ability to blitz because usually it's a scheme thing, so you don't have to be great at it. But that 4.38 speed, I think, is going to translate really well in blitzing for him. I think if we do decide to bring him on a blitz, he's going to be able to get to the quarterback very fast. The quarterback's going to have to make a decision very fast, or else he's going to be on the ground, thanks to the Needle Cam Dantzler. And I really love this pick. I can't say too much about it. You can tell that me and Jack really like this draft class. By the way, every person we've talked about, except for Justin Jefferson, where I said I think he'll be a good, I think he'll have production. Everybody else, I love the pick. I think it's amazing. And Cam Dantzler to me is another guy that I'm just like, wow, I'm so happy we got him. I can't wait to see him line up next season and hopefully take away some deep balls, maybe get an interception or two. Jack, what's your opinion on Cam Dantzler?
Yeah, I am very high on him as well. I think I love Justin Jefferson, I love the Gladney pick, and I loved Ezra Cleveland. I think all three of those are kind of home run picks for the Vikings, and you slide down in the third round, I think you get the same exact thing with Cameron Dantzler. I mean, I personally, I didn't think he was going to be there when we got to us in the third round, and when I saw his name on the board, I was like, okay, Zimmer has his one solid corner already. He is probably the best player available right now. Go out, get Zimmer his toys, and let him restructure this defense and turn them into something special, because we were something very special in that secondary when we had Xavier Rhodes in 2017 and Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander, and they clicked. Get some young guys in here, match them up with the guys like Mike Hughes and Holton Hill, and we're going to have some depth at this position, and I'm ecstatic about that. One stat line, I retweeted this from PFF today. Joe Burrow, the number one overall pick in this draft class, going up against all of his opponents in 2019, had a 95.2 overall grade, 5,341 yards, 56 touchdowns, and a 143.2 passer rating. Joe Burrow against Cameron Dantzler, who was guarding Jamar Chase, arguably the best wide receiver in all of college football, had a 70.8 overall grade, 13 yards, 0 touchdowns, and a 57.3 passer rating. So that says something. The capability of him being a true lockdown corner is there. I think when you match him up with a cornerback whisperer like Mike Zimmer, that's got to get Vikings fans excited, because Cameron Dantzler, he already has the ability to go out and shut down corners. He's more than willing to come downhill in the run game and make some big tackles as well. This is another name. I'm just kind of I'm probably just puking out purple right now. That's probably what it sounds like. But if you think it's a little bit of bias, which it could be, go and listen to Mel Kiper. Go and listen to these guys, Daniel Jeremiah, who is grading these draft picks, because everyone else out there is saying the Vikings absolutely crushed this draft. And Dantzler is just he was kind of the cherry on top after day 2. I was so happy. And I'm just pumped for Mike Zimmer to be able to have his secondary how he wants it again. I think this is a guy that they were very high on and not expecting to be there in the 3rd round. And right when they saw him, they pulled the trigger like that. So I, too, really like this pick, and I think this could be another Jersey candidate for me as well heading into the 2020. I don't know why I just said 23 times. Heading into the 2020 season.
Yeah, like I said, man, I really like that nickname, like the Needle. That's cool to me. I love guys with nicknames. But if you don't trust, Jack and I over at Load the Box, or you don't trust, Vikings fans who have followed this team their whole life and are going to be drinking the purple Kool-Aid, this is from CBS. That's why I'm pulling the list of names from right now, just to kind of refresh my memory. The Jefferson pick was an A, the Gladney pick was a B, the Cleveland pick was an A-, and Dantzler was a B+. So, and that stat that you pulled, about Burrow throwing to Chase, Dantzler has the ability to shut down the best offense in college football's number 1 guy. And I think Gladney also has the ability to shut down a number 1 guy. And after a while, if you think Gladney can shut down a number 1 and Dantzler can shut down a number 1, and if you have hope that Mike Hughes has just had some bad luck with injuries and he's the defensive back that the Vikings thought he was coming out in 2017 or 2018, this secondary could legitimately be either this season or next something to behold, something that could carry us deep into the playoffs. And that's why I really like these picks, and that's also why I really hope the Vikings decide to, and I know this is kind of a side tangent, but we're going to start speeding through the draft now that we're kind of through the bigger names. I think that this core of guys could be really good if we keep Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman around for another 3 years. I would let them finish out the end of Cousins' extension if that's the plan, unless we go 4-12 or 5 and whatever, 11 or 5 and 12 whenever the new extra game gets added. Really bad. I see no reason to not let these guys develop and see if Zimmer and Kubiak and this coaching staff and front office continue to build this team and see where we're at. Because right now, I think the state of the team is a lot better than where it was before the draft. Even with the mock drafts that me and Jack did last week, I think this draft turned out just about as good as any of the mock drafts that anybody has done, except for the ones where maybe Joe Burrow fell all the way to 22 because there was a glitch in the AI on TDN. So speeding through now, I'm going to go with all 3 of our 4th round picks here and just kind of talk about not necessarily them as a player, because to be honest, I don't know a lot about them as a player. I knew a lot about the first 2 days, and then once we got into that last day, the names started to go away that I recognized as much.
I can take the next 3 guys and kind of give little quick hitting notes on them if you want.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, because I kind of just have for the first 2 anyway. So we took a defensive end out of South Carolina named DJ Wan. We took a defensive tackle out of Baylor named James Lynch. And then we took a linebacker out of Oregon named Troy Dye. Jack, if you want to go through each one of them and give a little quick bit of the type of player that they are, I will then just kind of talk about how they fit in with the Vikings, the types of player that they are based on what I saw whenever I was watching TV, things like that. I think that would be a really good way to help us speed through these remaining 11 picks.
Yeah, for sure. And these 3, I think the 4th round guys are a few of the guys where I really kind of dove into it. I didn't know a ton about these three guys, I knew who Troy Dye was because I have a buddy who's an Oregon fan, and he's ecstatic that he's coming to Minnesota. But starting with DJ Wanham, the D-end out of South Carolina, I mean, he's got a great athletic profile. He's got the big, long arms that you want in a defensive end. I think you and I were both kind of hopeful that this was going to be a Jabari Zuniga pick, but I believe he went even before this, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong on that. But this is another toy. I guess the next two picks that I'm going to talk about, they're kind of new toys for co-defensive coordinator Andre Patterson. He's been able to work these defensive ends like a guy like Danielle Hunter, who was a third-round pick, same kind of athletic profile. He's got the long arms. He was able to turn him into something great, and I think that's kind of what we have in Wanham. I'm not ready to say he's going to be the next Danielle Hunter, but he has the athletic profile and the stature to get there. He's a prospect that I'm excited to watch Andre Patterson develop. With the 130th overall pick, like you said, we took James Lynch, defensive tackle out of Baylor. He did play some defensive end at Baylor in his time there as well, but he said in an interview after getting drafted that his favorite position where he thinks his best fit is in the 3 technique, which is kind of the Vikings' biggest glaring hole along the defensive line now. So if we can turn him into an NFL caliber player, it'd be exciting to get him in, maybe not right away on run down or on first and second downs, but get him out on third down, let him get after the passer, because if he thinks he's his best in a 3 technique, he's going to be a lot better than what Shamar Stephen is in the pass game. Also on top of that, he was the 2019 Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, and he had 13.5 sacks, and he led the entire NCAA with a total of 70 quarterback pressures. Going down to Troy Dye at 132, he's a 4-year starter out of Oregon. I don't know as much about him. He's not your true like built linebacker, but he's got more of an athletic profile to him. He was a 4-year starter at Oregon, and he led the team all 4 years in tackles. I think he's somebody that's going to be able to come in. I'm not necessarily ready to say he's going to contribute on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, we have Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr that kind of hold the fort down back there. You still have Ben Gideon. You have Eric Wilson as well. He's going to have to find his way into, I think for sure, he's going to be a depth piece on the 53-man roster, and I think he's going to be able to come in, use his speed and his athleticism on kickoff and go downfield and get some tackles. And potentially on more like, I think obviously if it's a passing down, you're going to have more of a nickel rather than a base defense. But I think he's a guy that's a lot better than a guy like Ben Gideon, maybe even a little bit better than an Eric Wilson out in pass coverage. But he's also, like I said, he did he was a leading tackler for Oregon for the last 4 seasons as well. So I definitely think he's an exciting prospect to keep an eye on. He's got that athleticism, maybe beef him up a little bit, get some more muscle on him. I think he is going to be possibly someday a starter at the NFL level. So that kind of wraps up. That's my speed hitting points on the first 3 taken out of the 4th round. I'm kind of out of breath now, though.
You might have to do that for the 5th, 6th, and 7th guys as well. But just to talk about the fits for the team, Wanham is obviously, defensive end, more athletic than he was production in South Carolina. That was terrible grammar, I understand that, but he has more of an athletic ability than he does the production on, the stat sheet. And I think, like you said, we wanted Jabari Zuniga. He wasn't there. I think the Jets took him, which the Jets took everybody that I loved in this draft, except for Jordan Love, which, went to the Packers. But I think he comes in, he gets a year or 2 of development, and then hopefully he can turn into Danielle Hunter 2.0. James Lynch, like you said, 3 technique. We needed a defensive tackle. I don't want to forget about the juggernaut Michael Pierce. Really like that on the defensive line, but he is more of a run stuffer and less of a get after the quarterback guy. So hopefully we can see Lynch come in and maybe make a play or 2 this season, playing at that 3 tech spot in obvious passing downs. He'll obviously be sharing snaps with guys like Hercules Mataafa. The list goes on and on of, pass rushers that we put in, in the middle of the line on 3rd and longs. And then Troy Dye, I think he's going to be a special teamer this year. We'll see what happens with Gideon. I think Gideon's in a contract year, and I don't see us extending him. So Troy Dye is probably going to be special teamer. Like you said, more athletic, probably going to be good in special teams. And then come next season or the season after that, if Eric Wilson is no longer with the team, then he becomes the default backup linebacker. And then, that wraps up the fourth round. I think it was a solid fourth round. I think, we took some guys that need some development, but I could very well see all three of them turning into solid contributors for the team, given a year or two of development. Going into the fifth round, we took defensive back Harrison Hand and then wide receiver KJ Osborne. And Jack, I actually want you to do this in reverse order because I want to talk about KJ Osborne first. What do you know about Osborne coming out of the U? And I've seen a lot of people getting actually kind of excited for, pick 176 in the fifth round. What do you know about him, and how do you feel about that pick?
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things where I'm trying to pull up his metrics right now, and my computer is kind of freaking out. But it was one of those picks where I was a little bit surprised. I think there was a couple of receivers still on the board that I liked as well. But he's an exciting prospect none the least. I think the primary focus that he's going to have in this season, I mean, he can ball. He's a good wide receiver. He's good after the catch as well. He's not the fastest guy. I mean, he was in the 64th percentile of his 40-yard dash, and he's strong. His bench press was in the 78th percentile, and he's got a decent vertical to him as well. But I think where he's going to come in, and I think he will end up potentially being a day one contributor, is on the special team side of things. He was a returner for Miami, and that's a huge hole for the Vikings, especially. I personally don't want Mike Hughes returning punts and kicks anymore. Got a little bit dicey last year when Marcus Sherrills wasn't on the roster, and we had Mike Hughes out there. He had a couple muffed punts, and it kind of scared me a little bit. It wasn't as sure-handed as a guy like Marcus Sherrills, so I think he's more of a natural kick returner and punt returner, which kind of excites me. I still like Amir Abdullah returning kicks, but maybe he can come in and kind of be that second guy on kick return and potentially overtake that punt returning position as well. I definitely think he's a playmaker. I think the one thing that's weird about this, obviously we took Justin Jefferson, have Adam Thielen, you have Tajay Sharp, you have B.C. Johnson. The Vikings rarely have four wide receivers, let alone it's rare that they have three wide receivers. They like to have 1 to 2 tight ends on the field at all times. And then when you got a guy like Dalvin Cook as well, it's hard to keep him off the field. So I don't necessarily see him seeing the field a ton in year one. Especially, we have some young guys that were on the practice squad last year that I think the Vikings are high in as well. We got another wide receiver that was an undrafted wide receiver in this 2020 class as well that I think a lot of people are high on out of Texas A&M. So I don't see him necessarily coming in and making a ton of contributions at the wide receiver position right away, but I think he could be a huge help on the special teams side of things.
All right, so that explains why I've seen some people getting pretty hyped up about a late fifth round wide receiver. But Jack, talk to me about Harrison Hand, because that's a name that we briefly covered in the cornerback show. I like him. I actually think he's a solid defensive back. I'm not as high on him as I am on Dantzler or Gladney, but I do like Harrison Hand out of Temple. Jack, what are the? I mean, I guess you're like the analytics guy now, which I'm okay with. I actually like it because you're kind of blowing my mind a little bit. But what's Harrison Hand bringing to the table?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an analytical wizard. I suck at math. That's not my strong suit. But there's a really cool site that I think. It was kind of surprised me. I didn't exactly know what the site was about 2-3 months ago, but I've really started to use it more. Will Ragetz uses some of these in his Sports Illustrated stories, and you see these spider graphs all over Twitter for these athletes, and this is where they come from. It's called mockdrafttable.com, and you just plug in a player's name. He is an interesting prospect as well. It's another cornerback for now, which it's turning into a suddenly deep cornerback position when we were both terrified a week ago that if we didn't draft enough cornerbacks, we were going to be stressed out going into the 2020 season, and I don't feel like that anymore. I think it's going to turn in. It's going to take some time, obviously. It could take a year or two for Zimmer to develop these guys. It took some time for Trey Waynes to develop. It took some time for Xavier Rhodes and Mackenzie Alexander to develop as well. But this is another guy where, I mean, it's starting to become a theme. I think the Vikings really like to take their chances on either an athletic profile or like a team leader / captain. A lot of their final picks are just really athletic guys and or captains of their football team, which I think that says something. They're looking for high character guys with good athletic profiles. But Harrison Hand, he brings in, he's 5'11", which obviously he isn't the biggest guy, but he's got decent arm length, and then he's not the fastest guy either, but where he can come in and make somewhat of a difference. I mean, there's been some people out there saying that, hey, the Vikings didn't draft a safety until the 6th round. Maybe Harrison Hand is a guy that can slide back to that safety spot, because what he does bring, he's got a broad jump of 133 inches and a 41-inch vertical. Both of those rank above the 95th percentile. So he's got hops. He can go up and he can go attack the football at its highest point. Maybe this is one of those prospects where he might not have a spot on this team at the cornerback position. And at this point, it's going to be really hard for me to tell who's going to even be on that 53-man roster, because we have a plethora of talented players at the cornerback position, but there's not a lot behind Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris. We drafted a couple. We signed one undrafted as well, with some hope as well. But you never know. I don't know a ton about Harrison Hand. I didn't do as much research on him because I was busy looking at guys like Gladney and Dantzler a little bit more than Harrison Hand. But I definitely think he has some potential. And if there's anyone out there that can unlock potential in cornerbacks, it is the Vikings head coach, Mike Zimmer.
Maybe we took him just to fill the void for the next time we play the Denver Broncos, and we need somebody to go up and man up Noah Fant in the red zone late in the game, because we lost Jayon Curse, who was just like really tall. So now we just get a short guy who can jump really high to go in and break up a last-second touchdown attempt. But moving on from Hand, we talked about Osborne. Going into the 6th round, we took Blake Brandel, offensive tackle, Oregon State, and we took Josh Metellus, a safety out of Michigan. I think Metellus and Harrison Hand could be having a pretty good battle in training camp. But at this point in the draft, we are really into let's just, like you said, let's just take an athlete, or let's take a guy with really high character, and let's just roll the dice. You know, you're not going to have a guy who's going to be a day one starter in these 6th or 7th rounds. I mean, even Tom Brady, it took him a while to, it took him like a year of, sitting the bench before, was it a year, or did he start in his rookie year?
I don't remember exactly what happened. He might have came on the field. We were very young when this happened. It's crazy.
Obviously,
he's still in the NFL, but I can't remember if it was his rookie year or the year after. But I
thought
know
it was the year after.
Drew Bledsoe got hurt, and he came, and then the rest is history. And now he's the best quarterback we've ever seen. Patrick Mahomes might give him a run for his money, but that's going to be when we probably have children at that point, so that's going to be a whole other story for itself. But yeah,
exactly.
You're
a step ahead of me.
Just touching on these prospects really quick. We don't need to spend too much time on these later round guys. I wanted to mention one quick thing as well. We did trade pick 155 to Chicago for a 2021 4th rounder. I think that was kind of a no-brainer. We're going to have another 4th round pick next year because of that. And then we traded 201 for pick 225 and a 5th rounder next year. So Rick Spielman, like I said earlier, he's already wheeling and dealing. Blake Brandel is a prospect that kind of raised my eyebrows. I didn't know a ton about him, but I've been looking up information on him, and I saw a tweet on Twitter. Somebody tweeted at the PFF Vikings Twitter page asking about his blocking and passing grades, which kind of blew me out of the water. In 2019, he had a 93.1 pass block grade and an 82.5 run block grade, and only allowed 5 pressures. So that is exciting. I mean, he played in the Pac-12, so it's not the strongest defensive conference by any means, but only allowing 5 pressures, that's something special for an entire college or collegiate season. And then going on to Josh Metellus, the safety out of Michigan. I don't know a ton about him either. I did write a quick piece on him, but I think what he brings to the table, I think what a few of the 2 safeties that we did draft in this class bring to the table, it just shows that both Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman have faith in being able to find safeties and develop them. Anthony Harris was an undrafted guy. Jaron Curse was a 7th round guy, and these are guys that are making a name for themselves in the NFL. I think Jaron Curse has a legitimate chance to start in Detroit. Anthony Harris was franchise tagged, but he's about to get paid by either us or, God forbid, we can't pay him, and then he leaves after this season. But Metellus, what he brings, he's not the greatest in coverage, but he does bring like a downhill style of football with him where he will fly downhill and smack you in the mouth. And I think we all know that we had, Andrew Sandejo on this team, and sometimes he would hit people too hard and it would scare me, and I would be like, okay, where's the flag? Because he absolutely just annihilated that guy. I don't know if that should be legal in the 48 states that are touching it. I don't know why I said 48 instead of 50. That was kind of weird. But there's like
because Alaska and Hawaii are lawless wastelands.
Well, yeah, but there's a saying. There's some sort of saying that goes with that, but I don't know what it is, and I thought I did. So, but yeah, that kind of wraps up that fifth round. And like I said, he's just kind of a really physical safety, and it really seems like that's what Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman like out of their safeties, someone that can come flying downhill. Obviously, Harrison Smith's willing to lay the pop as well. So I think that's what you get from a guy like Josh Metellus.
Yeah, another guy who I could very well see being a special teamo this year, maybe a practice squad guy who ends up being a special teamo in a couple years, and then he becomes one of the franchise's best wide receivers. Moving into the 7th round now, we take a defensive end, Kenny Willix, I think, or Wilikis, not positive. Defensive end out of Michigan State. CBS gave us an A- pick, so apparently I need to do some more reading up on him. We then take quarterback Nate Stanley out of Iowa. One of the better quarterbacks to go through Iowa. Really big, tall, statue guy. I told you, don't get too excited about taking, Jalen Hurts or anything like that. The Vikings were going to take a guy who's a statue, so that way if Cousins goes down, the offense doesn't have to change much, and that's what we did with Stanley out of Iowa. I will talk more. That's actually probably the only pick out of these four that we had in the 7th round that I'm really going to go into. We then took a safety out of Mississippi State, Brian Cole II, and then we took an offensive lineman, the only interior offensive lineman of the entire draft for us, Kyle Hinton out of Washburn, and we will see if maybe he becomes the next like super late rounder that the Vikings end up getting lucky with and tone him into like a Pro Bowl caliber player. I'm not getting my hopes up because I never get my hopes up with late round guys. But, Jack, I'll let you run through these guys, and then I'll talk about Nate Stanley, and then we can quickly run through UDFAs, and then we can get out of here.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about Kyle Hinton. You can touch on Nate Stanley a little bit. I'm not super high on him, but at some point we had to draft some sort of quarterback out of this draft class. I'm curious as to why it was Stanley over the kid out of Washington State, Gordon, that we both talked about. I think I believe he signed. I don't know what I was just saying. I believe he went undrafted and signed with Seattle. If I'm remembering correctly, I think that was the guy where I was projecting. I thought he was going to be at least drafted, maybe in the 5th, 6th round, and he ended up falling to Seattle. Hopefully he doesn't turn into an absolute stud at the quarterback position, sitting behind Russell Wilson for a while. Who knows if he'll even make that team or not. But, Kenny Willix out of Michigan State. This just got me excited after you said he had that A- grade. I was curious as to what the analytics look like on him because I haven't done a lot of research on some of these later round guys. I'll jump into that last, actually, because I did write a quick piece on Brian Cole II out of Mississippi State. Another guy, he played with Cameron Dantzler. He's another guy, physical, willing to partake and laying that big hit in the run game. I think that's where he is at his strong suit, and I think at some point we had to address this position a couple times. It's exactly what they did. In the later rounds, they have an undrafted guy as well, and they just have to bring them all in and let them compete because obviously we're set with Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris, but behind them, we really don't have any depth besides these rookies now, so it's going to be interesting to see who wins that spot, or the 2 spots. However, safeties, they normally keep 4 safeties, I believe, so it'll be interesting to see who kind of cracks the roster and makes it out of this rookie class. Willix, I'm excited for him, and I just got even more excited looking at his spider graph. They're saying that one of his biggest comparisons, 83.5% match, is Geno Atkins. And another one is Ngakoue at 79.7%. So those are 2 pretty solid names to be in comparisons with. And then, I mean, he's another guy with an athletic profile. He doesn't have the great, big, long arms that you like to see in a defensive end, but I don't think that always necessarily matters. He was in the 88th percentile in the bench press. His broad jump was 84th percentile, vertical jump 63rd percentile, and 40-yard dash 64th percentile. I think he's another guy where he is above the kind of the middle gap of defensive ends, analytically speaking, with his athleticism. And I don't know if you saw any of the videos or not of him on Twitter, but he can full on jump into the splits, and he's very flexible as well. And I don't ask me why or how I came across that, but I watched the entire video and I was just like, okay, dude, I'm in pain right now for you. I don't know how you're doing this, but all the power to you being able to do that. He is an exciting prospect, 7th rounder. Obviously, it's hard to get overly ecstatic about 7th rounders, but because you don't know how they're going to pan out at the next level. But we needed some more depth along that defensive line, and they took a chance on another guy with a good athletic profile. So I'm excited to see if he is able to crack the roster. I'm not necessarily sure he'll be able to, especially with us investing a couple 4th-round picks along that defensive line. And you still have some young, talented players that the Vikings have been grooming in their own system. But he's definitely someone to keep an eye on throughout camp.
Yeah, I do want to mention really quickly, I know I said this about pretty much every safety that we've mentioned so far. Brian Cole II, probably going to be a help on special teams. That's what you see with a lot of these super late round wide receivers, corners, safeties, even athletic linebackers. They end up playing a lot of special teams. The fast ones get to be gunners, things along that nature. But Nate Stanley out of Iowa, I actually watched 2 film breakdowns. I spent 2 hours of my life over this weekend watching Nate Stanley film breakdowns. One of them was in the game against Minnesota. Sorry to bring up bad memories. He's inconsistent. He's all right. He is obviously a really good leader. I mean, I think he's a high character guy. I think that goes kind of without saying. But he's just not, he's not flashy. He's not going to come in and, be the next Patrick Mahomes. He's probably not the next Tom Brady. He's an inconsistent thrower. But he can, occasionally he hits a deep ball and you're just like, wow, that was beautiful. Occasionally he hits a guy, who's in a tight coverage and he makes a perfect throw and you're just like, wow, that's a dime that he just dropped. And, there is no defense for the perfect pass. I think he could end up being a solid QB2 for the Vikings. I think he could easily be better than Mannion. Sorry, I almost said thank you because I was expecting you to jump in and tell me his name because I've forgotten it the last month that we've done the show. But I think Stanley could come in with a little bit of development, maybe be a practice squad guy. Maybe we keep 3 quarterbacks on this roster, and then we make Stanley the backup going into next season. So I think the reason we take him here is, one, I don't think we wanted to get into a bidding war for him. I think we wanted to get him on a cheap, 3 or 4 year contract. He can be the backup for 2 or 3 seasons of that contract, and I'm fine with it. It's nothing to get too excited about, but I did watch 2 hours worth of game breakdowns on Nate Stanley. And, that's kind of all I have. He's really big. I think he's 6'4", and, he's almost like Big Ben, but he doesn't move as much. So, hopefully that's the backup quarterback, which means he will be one of the Vikings' most beloved players, in due time, because everyone's going to be talking about, maybe we should give that Stanley kid a shot the second we lose to Chicago in week 2 or something like that. So, I think that's the draft class right there. If we're going to, if I'm going to put you on the spot and say, let's give it a grade, I would give draft overall, I think an A-, because I really think that going into the 4th, maybe even the 5th round, I think we got solid players that I could see contributing this year. And I think it puts us in a really good position to, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, maybe make a deep playoff run in 2021. I don't want to get my hopes up too much for this season because Jefferson needs some development. Everybody on this list needs some development, but I think you give these rookies a year to settle in. Maybe we see some flashes out of some guys, and the next, in 2021, we'll be ready to hopefully take the good rookie seasons we had, put those under our belt, learn from them, and then move into an even better spot where Ezra Cleveland will probably be stouting, and we'll start to kind of see how this team looks. But, Jack, I know you had a couple UDFAs you wanted to bring up. We're not going to go into all of them. I think we're just going to go into a couple of the bigger names that Jack has brought, and if I know anything about them, I will chip in, but feel free to talk about them because I don't know a lot about any of the UDFAs.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them either, but there are some names that were kind of circulating around Vikings Twitter. The Vikings did pay some not big dollars, but like $100,000 guaranteed to a couple of these names, which they outbid a couple different teams. I mean, these are two of the prospects that were other teams are trying to sign as well. And I'll start at the top with Neville Clark. He's a cornerback out of Central Florida. Couple quick notes. I watched a little bit of film on a few of these guys right before the show. I didn't have a ton of time today. But he's a guy, he will go up and he will take picks away from you. He'll go up, target the football at its highest point, and come down with interceptions. He has good break on balls when he's playing in zone coverage. And he's also willing to come downhill and lay the big hit as well, which I think at this point, if you listen to the show at all over the last 3-4 weeks or a couple months, you know I like physical cornerbacks, and anyone that reminds me in the slightest of an Antoine Winfield Sr., which I'm not saying he does, but anyone that has any sort of physicality in them at the cornerback position, that's why we were both so high on Gladney. That's the type of cornerback I want on the Vikings roster, where they have that dog mentality, some quick feet where they're going to break towards the football, and if they catch you running a slant across the middle, they are absolutely going to annihilate you. The next one, I think, is the player that everyone is the most excited about. I've seen a lot of people with like 53-man roster projections and having him kind of sneak onto the roster at the wide receiver position. Wide receiver Courtney Davis out of Texas A&M. Watched a little bit of his film as well, and all I can say is he's fast and he's a playmaker, and I think the Vikings could utilize a little bit more speed in that wide receivers room, somebody that has a little bit more of that playmaking, that big playmaker ability, and I think he has that. But obviously it's easy to get excited about guys when you're watching some of their good highlights from their last season in college. And he has some very, very good tape on him. So he's an exciting prospect. A lot of people had him potentially getting drafted in one of the middle rounds, 4th to 6th round grade. I think I've read a lot about him, and that's where a lot of people have seen him or thought he was going to go. And he fell. He went undrafted. I think it was Dallas who was bidding on him as well. I shouldn't say bidding. I don't know if that's the right term, but they were kind of fighting back and forth and offering him deals, and the Vikings ended up coming out on top, offering him the most amount of money to come to Minnesota, and he is going to be a Viking. The next name is Miles Dorn. He's a safety out of North Carolina. I undrafted safety. Anthony Harris was an undrafted safety. This guy is a very good tackler from what I can see on film, and we need depth at the safety position. I think his film excited me a little bit more than both Metellus and Cole, the safeties that we actually drafted. This is another guy where I think a lot of people had him getting drafted, not necessarily as early as Davis, but somewhere in that 6th, 7th round, getting picked up by a team. And I think he has some talent to potentially, there's no depth behind Anthony Harris or Harrison Smith. So I think it would not be fair to say he doesn't have a chance at making this roster just because of how limited we are at the position, and he has some talent there as well. The last name on this list is a position that a lot of people were upset that the Vikings did not target at all in the 2020 draft, which I'm not going to come out and say this is the reason why, but they did sign a guy, a local Minnesota boy. He actually went to Cretendurham Hall, who I played high school football against. I don't think he would have been there. He's younger than we are. But he played at Augustana, which is another Midwest college. I think it's in South Dakota, if I'm remembering correctly, where C.J. Ham played as well. And I think, if I remember correctly, he did play either his freshman or sophomore year. He started all 4 years. Started all 4 years at center for Augustana. Obviously, it's Division II football, But Adam Thielen and C.J. Ham both also played some Division II football, and they've kind of solidified roles for themselves on this Vikings roster. He was the Division II Remington Award winner for the nation's best center. Again, yes, it was Division II, but he was the the nation's best center at that level. So I think that's a position where there's a lot of people, and you brought it up earlier, that Joe Johnson, owner of Vikings territory and Purple PTSD, he was very upset that we didn't take any interior offensive linemen. I think the Vikings are going to have to go out and sign one. I think they might have something in Jake Lucina out of Augustana. He was undrafted. I'm not ready to say he's going to come out and make the roster even, but hey, maybe they're really high on this kid and they know something we don't know. I think you got guys like Drew Samia who are going to be able to step in. Maybe they're higher on Ezra Cleveland and they think Riley Reif's going to bump down to left guard, which would kind of bother me a little bit because we'd be paying him a lot of money to be playing guard for this team. But that kind of wraps up a couple of the names they're just names to watch. They don't, obviously, when you go undrafted or even if you get drafted the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, you don't really have any guarantee at making the roster, but there are a couple names to just keep an eye on when the Vikings get in the camp, whenever that may be.
Yeah, the fan base always does it. We always fall in love with somebody that we probably shouldn't be falling in love with. Look, I was one of the biggest Kyle Sloter supporters, and I really wish he was the backup quarterback. But, we have to be honest. He was probably, his ceiling is probably a backup quarterback. He can probably come in, run a system, have a good run game, win a couple games. Hopefully Cousins could come back in that time. And it's just what fan bases do. We love watching guys with no pads on, make highlight reel catches. And then in real game scenarios, whenever things are a little bit more physical and those pads and those contact, things change. But inevitably the fan base is going to fall in love with some UDFAs or some really late round guys. We'll kind of see what happens. But overall, like I said, I think this class gets an A-. I think in free agency overall, I'm going to give us a B+ to an A-. And there's a couple names in free agency that I do just want to throw out there really quick. One, Everson Griffin, still a free agent. The Vikings didn't let anyone take the number 97, so I don't know if I'm reading too far into that or if there's something actually there. But 97 still available. Everson Griffin still on the free agent market. Maybe he does come back to the Vikings after kind of testing the waters to see his worth. And then also, Josh Klein still hasn't been signed, but I don't think we're going to bring him back. But a guy like Kelechi Osemele, still out there, still a solid guard that we could bring in if we do want to compete this season at a high level. Overall, Jack, I'm going to put you on the spot right now, and then I'm going to be done for the show. I'm putting you on the spot. I'll do it first. What do you think the Vikings' 2020 record will be, assuming we play a full season? Because I'm going to go 9-7. And I know this is without looking at this is just looking at the roster, not going game by game or anything like that. But looking at the roster after this draft, Jack, what if you had to, gun to your head, which there is right now, gun to your head, what's the Vikings record going to be in 2020?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of when the schedule still hasn't been released, but when the opponents were officially released, I was like, okay, this isn't that bad of a schedule. We play the NFC South, and we play the AFC South as well. A lot of those teams got a heck of a lot better in free agency. Obviously, the Colts have Phillip Rivers. They had a good draft. Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a very good draft, and hey, they signed a guy by the name of Tom Brady, if you've ever heard of him, and he brought Rob Gronkowski with him, so it's going to be a party down in Tampa Bay. That is an away game, and I have some interest in going down to that game, especially if it's a December game. Go down to Florida, enjoy it. I'm getting way ahead of myself because I'm kind of not even trying to, just rambling like I always do and avoiding the question. But yeah, it's a tough schedule with a lot of young talent. I think I'm right there with you. I like that 9-7, 10-6 potentially. I think they could end up being a playoff team, especially with the new playoff rule where there's gonna be 7 teams. If you go 8-8 or 9-7, you have a legitimate chance at making the playoffs. I like that prediction. I think they have a lot of upside if these rookies catch on quick and they start contributing on day one and they're playing very good football. I think we could be having a lot different conversation. But we're a long ways away. We don't even know what the 53-man roster looks like at this point.
Yeah.
We don't know if there's going to be a preseason. They're talking about eliminating the bye, which I think would be very hard on these people on these players, because the bye is a break from their job, which they're doing from, August or July, August, all the way through end of December, just kind of a game that's one of the most physical games on earth on their bodies. So I think that'd be tough on them. There's a lot of factors that's going to go into this, but I really do think, I think I agree with you. I could see him being a 500, 9-7 team. Historically, the team has not done well under Mike Zimmer after a year of making the playoffs, but that could change if these rookies really catch fire right away. But I do like that 9-7. But just to be Mr. Optimistic, I will say 10-6.
Well, Jack, since you're so close to me, and since I kind of want to be optimistic because I feel bad about not being as excited about Justin Jefferson, I'm saying we'll go in 9-0 and we'll win in the damn Super Bowl. And Ezra Cleveland is going to catch a pass this season. Or at least Brian O'Neill. Brian O'Neill used to be a tight end, and I don't understand how we haven't reported him as eligible and had him go out for a pass yet, but maybe Kubiak will do it. It's what I want to see. I think he has a catch technically because he caught a deflected pass, but I want to see a design play for Brian O'Neill, maybe a fake field goal or something. But that's the draft, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the draft. I've been known to get a little sappy on these shows. I'm not going to get too bad about this, but it was definitely some relief because we're going through a lot of stuff right now as a country with this virus and everybody having to stay inside and everybody's social lives basically getting massacred by this. So it was a really nice relief. It was really nice to sit with like 3 or 4 friends and drink some beer and think about nothing but football for like 4 hours. And then think about nothing but football for the next 2 days, really. So, really great draft this season. I like what the Vikings did. And, yeah, I mean, from me, I know this is Jack's thing, but, Skol is always, whatever he says. And, Jack, I'm gonna leave it to you to give, your little hype-up speech about this draft class, and then we can let the people go.
Yeah, I think the Vikings honestly just absolutely crushed this draft. I tweeted something similar to this. The Vikings 2015 draft classes was one of those draft classes where it was special. You get Stephon Diggs in the 5th round, Danielle Hunter in the 3rd round. It was a very special draft, and I think we could look back 5 years from now and be looking at this 2020 draft class in a similar manner. I think there's a lot of talent that we had on the front end, but there's going to be a couple of these guys that we took from the 4th to the 7th round that they are going to stick and they're going to be a legitimate player in the NFL. We had 15 total picks. I think a few of those guys are going to pan out. And just a couple quick notes. I wrote that big piece, and at the end of it, I gave my overall grade. I guess great minds do think alike because I also gave the Minnesota Vikings an A- on this year's draft class. And it's a tough thing to do, but some of the notes that go into that and the things that got me excited, Zimmer, he got his corners. It's been obvious since he came here. He loves drafting his defensive backs so he can kind of warp them into what he sees as a legitimate starting corner in the NFL, and he got a few of them in this draft class. We potentially got our left tackle of the future in Ezra Cleveland, a position that hasn't been, Riley Reiff has been average for us over the last few years, but he hasn't been great. If we can get a guy like Brian O'Neill out on the left side, maybe he can even surpass what Brian O'Neill has done. You can get 2 very good tackles, very young as well, and you could solidify this offensive line moving forward. We got a top 5 receiver in Justin Jefferson, in my opinion, in this draft class. We got a ton of late-round value. Our defense got a lot younger. Rick Spielman traded all around the draft and everywhere but up, I should say, but he traded down. He made the team better by getting a lot of young talent, and he also gave himself 12 total picks. That's a little bit of a projection, but right now there's 10 picks total that the Vikings have, and that's without comp picks, and I think they're projecting Trey Waynes is going to get us a 3rd rounder, and then Mackenzie Alexander is going to get a 6th rounder for us, which would bring us up to 12 overall picks. So not only did he draft and kind of restock the talent we have on this roster now, but he also got the team better for the future, for the 2021 draft as well. And I just want to leave this here. The defense, it wasn't great last year. The cornerbacks was a huge area of concern. We solidified that spot in this draft, which I think was huge. But this offense moving forward, we lost Diggs, and we thought it was going to be scary. If we can get Kirk Cousins some protection, we've seen him. He has a top 5 arm in the NFL. He's one of the most talented one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL when he has time or when he's able to do a bootleg to either side and find his receivers downfield. He's able to hit his receivers in stride. He's got the accuracy. He's got the arm strength. We might have gotten him that protection with Ezra Cleveland, obvious, but just listen to our skilled guys now. It's going to be an exciting 2020 season, even if it is a little bit of a rebuild. It's not a complete rebuild because I think the Vikings still have a ton of talent on this roster. But think about, you have Kirk Cousins, obviously, and you have Dalvin Cook out of the backfield. We lost Stephon Diggs, which really hurts. But we have Irv Smith Jr. coming on to his sophomore season, which I think he's going to kind of be a candidate for breakout player of the year for the Vikings. We still have Kyle Rudolph as well. Then you get Adam Thielen, you get Tajay Sharp in free agency, you have Olabisi Johnson, who was successful last year, and you throw in a guy like Justin Jefferson and some of these speedier guys that we took undrafted or later, and we had some undrafted and later round picks from last season's draft as well that I think the Vikings are also high on. So we have a ton of playmakers all over the field. It's going to be very exciting to get Kirk Cousins in a similar system to what he was in last year with Gary Kubiak staying around and being the offensive coordinator this year. That's something that Kirk Cousins hasn't had in his career, so I'm excited to see what he can do staying in the same system for 2 years in a row. But overall, like I said, it was an absolutely astounding draft for the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings got a lot better, and it was pretty obvious that the Packers got a lot worse. They took your boy, and now you have to hate Jordan Love. I don't know if I should have brought this up because you might want to jump in and say something now.
Yeah, you've upset me pretty badly. Like I didn't think I was gonna cry or anything, but like I'm getting some tissues because I'm so upset because he's gonna be so good and he's gonna end up toasting us, and I'm gonna be like, everybody, I told you we should have taken him at 22, but no, we wanted this freaking draft bust, Justin Jefferson out of LSU. Like I'm being very pessimistic with that, but like I love him. I thought he was so good.
Well, now you can't love him anymore because he's on the wrong side of the border, but that wraps up my draft take. It was a little bit longer than normal. I'm excited for it. It was really the thing that we've been looking forward to for the last 2-3 months now, and now it's over. Hopefully we can get through this virus and get back to football season because we all absolutely need football season to get here. On top of everything, Vikings crush this draft, and Skol as always.